My wife and I recently purchased our third vacation rental property with our partner in Tennessee. And after returning back from Tennessee to Ohio, I was with a friend and he had asked me something. He said, "How many vacation properties do you think you'll buy?" And without blinking, I said at least 100 more. And that's just the warm up. Then he asked another question. Did you see yourself doing that, or did it just happen? Like, did you see yourself investing in vacation properties, or do you see yourself getting to 100? Like, did that just happen, or did you always see yourself doing that and growing to that level? And it was a really cool conversation because I got to really share that it wasn't just then. Some things happen in life, yes, but the reality is most things that I have at least observed and in my experience don't just happen. I had these visions 13 years ago. I remember when my wife, Kelsey, and I have been together 13 years now. And I remember when we first met, we would go on dates and we would go on drives and we would talk about life and we would talk about our goals and our visions, what that looked like. And this is 13 years ago. And I remember being on vacations with my family, and then other times we'd be on vacation with her family, and we'd be on beaches and in different places. And I remember walking those beaches every time we were ever at a beach home on vacation. And I would say, I can't wait till we own 20 of these one day. I just can't wait till this happens in the business that I just started. And I started to envision the big picture, try to understand like what do I want that to be like? What do I want to paint over the long haul? And although while it may not end up 100% how this picture I'm envisioning will look, if we can essentially build and outline what we generally desire and what we want our life to look like, then usually you'll land a lot closer to what that picture might look like than if you don't. So in this episode, this is a selfish episode, all right? This is something that I want to talk about because I'm so passionate about this. And I think that in the many conversations I have with a lot of entrepreneurs, like I feel it's not talked about. I think that we don't really talk about the long play, like not just the, what are we trying to acquire this year? How many millions in revenue we're trying to accomplish in the next 12 months and next month, and not now, but like, what is that big picture? What does that really look like? And so I do want to say that when we talk about building wealth, I'm positioning it as an entrepreneur because we have a mechanism and a weapon that other people don't have. And so as an entrepreneur, these are my 11 years of finding. So I just want to say, I'm going to share a little bit of what my experience has been because I have been through it all. Like many people listening to this, you've probably been through similar things. I remember my first business business partner had some really major, let's just call ethical issues and stole from us, and our business died in less than 18 months. I started another business. I then overhired a few years in. I made a ton of bad financial decisions because we had an influx of cash, and so I got excited, and then we ended up overhiring and having to take out lines of credit, and we maxed out our lines of credits and our credit cards. I then moved across the country, started a third business on the side. We had to close that down within a year. I started our fourth business on the side, had to close that within 3 months because I couldn't do everything. We then just lost almost everything that we had outside of our main business, and we had $1.06 in our bank accounts, $25,000 in lines of credit, not including the several thousand on high yield interest credit cards. Then we changed direction in our business, laid off half our staff, and in the same year, however we were creatively able to make this happen, we bought our first investment property. Next year, we crossed $100,000 in cash position in the bank. Next year, we bought our commercial downtown building. We restored it. We opened up what we call coffee space co-working that's 90 to 95% occupied as a co-working space with collective 8,000 square feet. Then we bought our next investment property. We bought a residential property, and we just recently bought our third vacation property. And all of that combined as of last month, and I track my wealth every single month, has officially pushed our assets just past the $1.7 million mark, not including the valuation of our businesses if we were to sell. Now, I'm not saying all this to brag. what I want to do is I want to show you, like, I've been through so much. I have been so diversified in my attention in starting collectively 4 different businesses over a 10-year or 11-year period of time. And there's another one that only lasted about a month I didn't mention, but it would have made it 6. So I say this because I've been through so much of that, but in spite of the suffering that we endured in those financial situations, in being so diversified and business partners leaving and all of these scary realities that we had to endure, we have prevailed. We have prevailed through that. And I know maybe some of you listening right now, you might say, Josh, like 1.7 million, like I have whatever. And you know what? That's awesome. And I'm sure one day, I'm going to be getting there, and I want to share this for everyone that maybe wants some additional like perspective on how do we go build wealth. As an entrepreneur, we come in with usually with the vision of accomplishing what I call the 2 goals of entrepreneurship. The first goal is we want simply to fall in love with the game. We want to fall in love with what we're doing. We often leave out of either desperation or painful experiences in the workplace, and we're tired of it. And instead we want to have something that we can fall in love with the building, fall in love with the breaking down, helping people, growing personally inside the business, growing the business itself. And then the second goal is we usually start businesses to provide freedom of our time, freedom to make choices when we want to make choices, freedom to influence staff and impact the world, freedom to have the finances and the money and the income and the wealth that we desire. But a big part of all of that, to make it all cohesive and actually work as entrepreneurs, is financial. If we can't manage our finances, we aren't gonna be able to make that. We're not going to be able to make it any longer, or only a certain point, until eventually it completely implodes on itself. And the challenge is, I think that we get so caught up in the grind. We get caught up in the grind of our business that we don't take a time to step back and say, where does this business fit in the big picture? Like, if this is the arena, or this is the player, this is the arena. What do I want the arena to look like with the players in it? And what do those players look like? And what do I want the crowd to look like? And so if we kind of zoom out a little bit, it's going to allow us to start to develop this big picture. And that is what is required to build wealth. And I think the reality is it's not our fault. I just don't think that we were taught. I remember in my junior year in high school, 11th grade, and we had a class called Career Seminar, and it was an entire half-year class. And at the time, I'm 17, and I'm reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. I'm like super into personal development and Dave Ramsey, and like studying finance and building wealth. And I'm like obsessed with this when I'm 17 years old. And I remember being in this career seminar class, and we're in this career seminar class, and I was waiting for us to get to the module on budgeting, because I'm just a budgeting numbers nerd. And so I'm like strictly using a budget since I was like 16, working the job, and I'm like working on a budget, making decisions, and I'm just waiting for it. And finally it gets to the week that was budget week, where we were going to learn about budgeting as a bunch of 17-year-olds, of which 82% didn't have jobs. So it's kind of funny there. But the thing was, they didn't even teach it. It was one day. She talked for one class, 40 minutes, and never for the rest of the week did we do anything related to budgeting. We had one day. We were taught how to manage our finances and do budgeting for one day. We never talked about entrepreneurship. We never talked about real estate. We never talked about building out assets and truly building wealth. We never talked about eliminating and just annihilating unsecured bad debts. We never talked about it. So like, I don't fault people for not having this big picture, starting to think like that, because we were never taught it. And so we have to learn those things. I believe that's why we have these popcorn gurus that just kind of like blow up. We all see them. They're probably in your industry, right? They blow up and they're the poster child of whatever. And then a year and a half later, they end up imploding. And oftentimes it's because they're so short-sighted, or they're so aggressive that they throw themselves in a bad position. That's why some athletes can make $20 million over their working career, only to be broke within 5 years. But on the other hand, it's also why engineers can make $100,000 a year and end up with $20 million in net worth after their working years. And so there's a great saying that Robert Kiyosaki says. He says, and this always stuck with me, rich people buy assets, poor people buy liabilities. So rich people buy assets, things that produce income, things that appreciate, and poor people buy liabilities, things that are expenses. They're nice to have. They're these fun things, and it's not that it's not that I believe we shouldn't have those. I have those. We all do, but to a fault. When we start to have so many liabilities that we have no assets and all of our attention goes into just the next paycheck or the next payroll or the next buy or the next home improvement for all of us out there that have homes, then we're going to start to live like what we were at before we started the business. You see, we get into business with all these big goals of what we want to do. And the cool thing is, by doing that, you have taken that first step to that first asset. So all of this, I want to get to three things here. I don't want to belabor this, but the thing is, most people before we become entrepreneurs, we have jobs. Just over broke is what some people call it. We have jobs. And then as entrepreneurs, though, the cool thing is we have an asset if it's used right. Your business can be an asset for a lot of things, but largely, in my opinion, it is for a mechanism to build wealth in other areas or to make it the wealth building device. And you have tons of leverage in doing that. And so if we're not careful, then that business is not an asset. It does not appreciate. It will not be able to be sold. And in reality, we're just working a job, but we have a ton of clients, a ton of customers, and we're not making much more, if more at all, than we would have been if we just worked a 9 to 5. And so what I want to talk through is three things. These are three things that I believe are requirements for building wealth as an entrepreneur with that mechanism of your business that you can start to leverage for that wealth building compound effect. So first thing I think is required. I believe we first need to dream bigger. And if I asked you, what's the big picture for your life? How would you paint that? What would you say? I know it's a very open question, like what does the big picture actually look like? Because we can't predict what's going to happen in 42 and a half years or 21 and a half years or whatever that is. But it's kind of scary because a lot of times I find in conversations when I start to ask what's your big picture for life? Like, what do you want your life to look like? The amount of no's and perplexed looks you'll get is pretty high. I'd be, if I were to put a stamp on or a number on how many people actually know what they want, the general big picture of their life, they want the big picture to look like, it would be a small percentage of the amount of conversations I've had that people just simply don't know. And so what would you say? If you didn't, do you know what you want that entire picture to maybe look like, so we at least have that direction? And in my opinion, I think too many people just don't dream big enough. It's really, really small stuff. Like, I want to have a business and I want to help a lot of people. Okay, great. That's cool. But let's chunk up a little bit. How do we get a little bit bigger than that? Okay, well, what do you want your family to look like? What do you want your wealth to look like? Your finances to look like? How much do you want to give and be generous with every single year? Not that it's not good to focus on what we're building, but we need to dream bigger. Challenge yourself to say, what is the big picture? What do I think is just over that line of being possible that I'm that's not possible? Oh, having that second home on the beach in Barbados, it's not possible. Having that Tesla that I really wanted, the Model S is $122,000. It doesn't make sense. No one should have a car like that. Challenge yourself to say, okay, well, how can it be possible? How can I expand my mind to dream a little bit bigger outside of that? There's a great quote of scripture here in the Bible, and Luke is in 14:28-30 says, is there anyone here who, planning to build a new house, doesn't first sit down and figure out the cost so you'll know if you can complete it? If you only get the foundation laid and then run out of money, you're going to look pretty foolish. Everyone passing by will poke fun at you, saying he started something he couldn't finish. Wow. How many people go into their businesses without a plan of how is this actually going to help me in the big picture? Am I going to exit the business? Do I want to sell the business? Do I want to build in the business asset column? Do I want to go adjacent and just create big income so I can invest in real estate and invest in other things? And How many people don't know that? What if you run out of money? What if you start the foundation of your business, but you're only ever focused on the day-to-day and you never really think of the big picture and what you want that to look like, that you run out of money? And right now, I believe we're all building that big picture. But whether we have a plan for it or not is up to us. And that motion is already in play. We're already painting the picture. Wouldn't it be a great idea if we started penciling in what we think the rest of the picture should look like, regardless of how much regardless of how much we have remaining in that picture to still paint? So that's the first thing. The first thing, I believe we need to dream bigger. The second thing, I think we need to get our house in order. If your personal finances and your managing of finances within your business isn't working, then start there. Like, you can't build wealth without the largest tool that you have at your disposal, and that is your income. Because if we can have a big income, big incomes make big dents in debt, and they acquire assets much faster. And something that's always intrigued me, and this is just, it's foreign to me just because I'm just a numbers nerd. I know not everybody is like that, to be fair here, but it's always intrigued me that when I talk to someone and I ask questions about like their whether it's personal finance conversations or business finance, I'm talking about P&Ls and balance sheets, and I talk about some of these basic things, and like, well, I don't know, I don't keep up on my books at all, or I'm too busy, I don't like talking about numbers. Like, honestly, that's just my least favorite part of the business, and I hear that so often. The reality is, like, that's no excuse. Like, if you want to build wealth as an entrepreneur, you have to shift that mindset. Because wealth is established in numbers. At the end of the day, on paper, it is in numbers. And if you don't know how those numbers work, and you don't know how they all came together, you're not going to be able to get to large numbers. How many billionaires just got there and they don't know how to read a balance sheet, or they don't know how to budget, or they don't know how to read a P&L or a statement of cash flow? Like, those are things. Now, those are things that I call getting your house in order. Like, we need to improve our skills. If you don't have the skills, go acquire them. If you're in business, read the book Profit First. It'll change your life, change our life, help us get out of a lot of debt, and really build a machine that is not eating it's not a monster cash eating machine. And it's helped us get out of that. Go read Profit First. If you struggle with personal finance, go read some Dave Ramsey stuff. He's a great start. Really, really warms you up to a ton of things like budgeting, eliminating debt and building wealth. If you're not budgeting in your business, budget in your business. Control your ad spend and your inventory planning and forecasting, and making sure that you're not over leveraged on labor or in certain areas, and make sure that you have profits that are being set aside for retained earnings, saving for that rainy day, starting to stack cash within the business. And most importantly, for all of us visionary entrepreneurs, don't go chase that shiny new business, because as you grow, you're always going to have opportunities, and they're only going to come at you harder, and they're only going to be larger. And so maintain the path, have that compounded focus within that, because if you want to really build that wealth, you have to stay focused in that. And another thing that I think is really probably I love talking real estate. And so anytime I start talking with real estate, people start getting intrigued by it. And I hear a lot of like, hey, let me know when you're buying the next property. Like, I'd be really interested to go in with you. And while some people, I'd be like, hey, you'd be great to go in. We could buy some properties together. Others, in the back of my mind, I think, you're not ready yet. Like, if your business isn't thriving and you're not stacking profits every month, you should not be going and trying to grow your net worth in these other areas, when we can take all that focus and put it here and try to increase the success within that single area of your business. Now, when we do these things, when we get our house in order, I believe that when we can get the house in order and grow a thriving business, then what's going to happen is, and you'll get to experience this really cool, it's a really cool journey, where flip switch, where you're living in a state of just kind of surviving. And then you start to get into this stage of thriving. And when you get there, what happens is you'll start noticing that your cash is stacking faster, you're paying down debt faster, and you're to the point of really being able to do damage. And then as you start stacking cash inside your business, the question will become, how do I start to utilize this cash? And in that case, we can go deep in our businesses. We can also go deep in the other assets. But the most important thing is we're focusing in on these assets. The third thing is this. So we get our house in order. First of all, We dream bigger. Make sure we have this big picture, like what do we want our actual lives to look like? And then we get our house in order. We can't go focus on building wealth if we're worried about trying to make payroll this week. And then the third thing is, I believe that if you really want to win, it is a requirement that you play the infinite game. You know, for me, the reason I told my friend, like, hey, 100 properties, that's just the warm up, is because I'm playing for the infinite game. I'm not playing for today. I'm not just playing for tomorrow. I'm playing this for my life. And when you start to think from that perspective and you start to zoom out and you start to look 35 years ahead and you start to say, hey, I'm playing the infinite game. Now, while the game might look different in 35 years, I'm still playing it. And when you can zoom out like that, it helps make the smaller suffering moments right now, or right tomorrow, right this week, it starts to make them not as painful, because we know I'm playing the infinite game. I'm gonna get 6 punches to the face and a kick to the groin this week, but next week I'm back. Next week I'm on my feet and I'm gonna keep fighting. And when you do that, when you stop becoming a victim of every circumstance because you're playing the infinite game, then you're just gonna get up and you're gonna keep boxing. You're gonna keep fighting. You're gonna keep fighting forward and failing forward in all of that. There's a great story, and I just read this yesterday, so I think this is really perfect timing. There's a story of a girl named Julia Hill, and Julia lived in California. And one day, she and some of her friends, they were all tree activists. They decided to go and occupy a 1,500-year-old redwood tree named Luna. And they decided they're called a treeist, and they would hoist people up and they would put them in these trees so that way the logging companies and the lumber companies were not able to chop down these going extinct redwood trees when 98% had been eradicated and there were a few left. And so they would occupy these trees. And so in December of 1997, Julia Hill in the canopy poised herself in the canopy of a 15-year-old redwood tree named Luna. And when she put herself there, her entire group was there for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks of being there, people started going down. And as people started lowering themselves from the trees, they had these little platform things. You can go Google this. They have these little platforms that they were living on basically for 3 weeks. People started going down after week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. But Julia, after the 3rd week, when the last person was going down, she climbed up. And when she climbed up, she ended up putting herself at the very top of the tree and building a spot there. And from December of 1997 to December of 1999, she occupied that tree for 738 days until it finally ended with an action and agreement from the Pacific Lumber Company to spare that tree and add a 200-foot buffer zone surrounding the tree. And Julia was 23 years old. When I hear this, whether or not you think it might be a little silly to go sit in a tree for over 2 years to save a redwood, her tenacity and her fortitude to play the infinite game is what caused her to win. She said, I'm staying up here until this happens. I'm not in it just for a week. I might say I'm coming for a week and then get out. That's not me. I'm in this for the infinite game. It's adopting that mindset of, if you want to build true and tremendous wealth, you have to have the attitude and the mindset and the perspective of, I will not lose. There's a saying that the coffees, Kelsey and I don't know about the rest of the coffees, maybe they say this, but Kelsey and I have developed this saying and things that we will tell each other when we are in and when we've been backed against the corner, when we've been in the worst situations we ever could have imagined, when we're broke as can be and we're traveling and we don't have enough money to go do this. When we're in those moments, we have a saying, if life has cornered the coffees, and there's nowhere behind us that we can go, and the only way is through, we fight. And so if you're in a season of life and in your business right now that you feel like that, Play the infinite game. Adopt the mindset of I will not lose. I will fight. The only way is through. I'm not going through this brick wall behind me. I've set my limitations. I have decided I'm playing the infinite game. So it doesn't matter how hard you push me against this wall, I will push back a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder because I'm not playing this for today. I'm not going to cower because of today. I'm going to push forward. This podcast is number 70 something. But I'm 10 times better than I was when I did number 1. When we launched the first 10 episodes and we had less than 100 total downloads, and that was over 10 weeks, 2.5 months in, less than 100 downloads of this podcast. We've done 70 something now. In every podcast we do, I become better. I become a better communicator, a better interviewer. Some of the first ones were not very good. It was painful. And there are moments when I'm like, this is so much work. But I know that the long game is not ending today. I know that it is not episode 70 that I'm stopping. I know that I'm going to continue doing this as long as I need to, as long as it is in alignment with what I believe that big picture looks like. If you want to build a real estate empire, don't stop after 2 properties and one of the properties isn't doing so hot. That's not playing the infinite game. That's playing the short game. And you have to exercise in doing this. The biggest thing is this delayed gratification. Stop saying yes to all the nice things today. Like, it's so easy. I remember when we got our first office, I just wanted to fill it with literally everything. So I did. I used all of our money, all of our cash, even took out some credit card stuff because I would pay that off before the interest kicked in, right? To buy furniture and buy glass desks and buy all these things that at the end of the day really aren't what produce profit inside our business to create that lever that we can pull to really build wealth. I'll end with this. On the journey of building wealth, what I've observed is it can begin to feel lonely, which is why I think it's so valuable to surround yourself with like-minded people, people who celebrate your wealth, who celebrate your successes, who celebrate your hard work and see the hard work for what it is and what it took to get there. Because so many people in your circle right now, in my circle right now, they see the before and they see the after. But they don't see that mundane, anxiety-inducing, scary middle filled with heartache, wins, fails, and loads of pain. We've experienced this in our journey. As you start to grow, the challenge is it becomes, it's hard to connect with people. When you want to talk about what you love and you want to talk about what you're passionate about, it's just when it starts to get out of the realm of what other people believe are possible, it's hard to connect on things outside of just general pleasantries. And so understand that on this journey, you still love people, even though you might not have as much in common or you might not intentionally spend as much time with them. So my question to you is this. In this, what is your big picture? Do you know what that looks like? Have you vividly drawn out what do I want my wealth to look like? The general direction I want to be going so I can actually paint that. Because if you don't know, then take time to know. This episode was produced by Dylan Counts. If you would leave us a rating on the Ecommerce Alley podcast, whatever platform you're on, we would be so grateful. And if you want to join a group of like-minded people, e-commerce owners who are experiencing similar things as you, who are in a similar growth journey as you before or after where you're at, then go to alleypodcast.com/group, join the free group, and we'll see you in the next episode.